Hi, this is Kay. This is by far my most exciting ketogenic video because it's a culmination of what I've learned about ketogenic biohacks, tips, tricks, and tweaks. I've studied nutrition my whole life. My husband and I have been on the ketogenic diet. In August, it will be 2 full years, and I have studied it intensely, experimented intensely, and I've helped a lot of other people do it. So this is what I've come up with that are just those treasured nuggets of knowledge and techniques so that you can really maximize your ketogenic diet. The first thing is, I'm a citizen scientist. I am not a doctor. Nothing that I'm going to say is meant to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any disease. If you need medical care, go to a doctor. Okay, this is for educational purposes only, but it is really cool. Okay, the priority here is health span, as in the span by which you are, the length of time that you are healthy. For certain people, it will be about fat loss. For other people, it's going to be for specific issues that they would like to mitigate. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to just hit this hard about losing weight. It's the whole picture on how to just basically have your body work better. There are, oh, by the way, I do not monetize my channel whatsoever. I do not make a penny on anything that I ever mention. And even though I'm going to show you some great products that I've used, I am not at all profiting or affiliated with any of these companies whose items I may show you. It is for the sake of your potential well-being because you might like to use them and they may just be some of the best ones to use. Okay, the people that I want to be extra careful with regarding disclaimers are people who are pregnant or nursing and growing children. I do not personally think it's a good idea to do intermittent fasting if you're trying to promote that much growth in a baby that's in you, in a baby that you're nursing, or in growing children. The ketogenic diet by every single great functional medicine doctor that I know thinks it's absolutely great and super healthy for someone who's pregnant or nursing, and even helps prevent them from getting diabetic while they're in gestation, and also helps keep the baby from having diabetic tendencies. So it's not about no keto for them. It's about, basically not doing intermittent fasting. The suggestion by some of my favorite experts are to eat 3 meals and don't snack for those people. Okay. Also, one thing I really want to point out is, especially modeling Dr. Bernstein's low-carb diabetic diet, he's done a great job with people who follow his diet who basically get normal blood sugar because they're not jacking up their insulin and going back and forth like a yo-yo. The people who are on any kind of diabetic medication need to take any information or advice that they may get here and take it to their doctor so that medications by their doctor can be adjusted so that their blood sugar doesn't get too low. Before you start, absolutely measure yourself. Try to measure, your chest or bust and your waist and your hips. If not, at least measure your waist so that you're going to get an accurate meter of your progress, because the scale is really messed up when it comes to knowing how much fat you may have lost or muscle you may have gained, and or water that has fluctuated. And your water will fluctuate quite a bit, and a lot of your weight loss in the beginning will actually be water. And that leads to the keto-flu concept and what it's called, which is really when you lose a lot of water and the minerals that go with the water, and pretty much you suffer from some form of dehydration, and that's where a lot of weakness and nausea can come from. Well, my most critical set of hacks and tips and tricks and tweaks has to do with keto-flu. When you have high insulin, like most people do, unless they're type 1 diabetic, even some of them have high insulin because they're eating carbs and that makes them have to take more insulin. But the high insulin, otherwise called hyperinsulinemia, makes your kidneys hold more water and therefore hold more salt. And therefore, when you lower your carbs quite a bit, the insulin goes down, and a combination of the insulin and the carbs makes you hold water. For every carb molecule, your kidneys are going to respond directly and indirectly through insulin and the carbs together. Your kidneys are going to respond by hanging on to what people consider a normal amount of water, but really this high carb diet that people have been plagued with in the last a little less than 100 years, that's actually not healthy. It may be normal, but it's not healthy. So when you suddenly cut your carbs, you're going to suddenly lose a lot of this water, and there go the electrolytes with it, thus keto-flu. So I have some fantastic little hacks here, and my favorite supplements, which I make no money off of. I'm just sharing this out of love to help you with this mitigating this keto-flu. And hang on, because you're going to adjust, you're going to adapt. It is most critical in the beginning, and then your whole body, your lower carbs, very low carbs, your insulin and your kidneys are going to know what to do. Anytime there's a change, even if it's a great change, there is an adaptation phase. So, and a couple other clues here before I tell you which electrolytes I think are absolutely great. When your blood pressure is high, it's a lack of potassium. When your blood pressure is low, it's a lack of salt. No, that was not intended for medical advice. So, if you're having a keto-flu or you have hyponatremia, basically it's a form of dehydration that is not relative to how much water you drink. It's about how much salt you have in your body, because salt hangs on to water. And the reason that affects the blood pressure is because when there's not enough salt, there's not enough water, or what you're used to, and when that's the case, blood volume is dependent on both the salt and the water. The salt to attract the water. Doesn't salt attract water? Well, when your blood volume is too low, meaning your salt is too low, your blood pressure drops. If your blood pressure is too high, you don't have enough potassium to relax your entire cardiovascular system. Okay, so I want to show you my very favorite products. One of them is brand new, well, more or less new enough to not be in the stores, only online. It's only $13 for 48 servings. A serving is a teaspoon. Trace Minerals Research. You see the word trace minerals there, 40,000 volts. I'm going to turn the label around quickly, but you can look at it closer online. That has a background of concentrates being added, which is what we put in our keto drink. We put in our keto drinks for digestion when I made that video well over a year ago. And yet this new product, like everything Trace Minerals Research makes, adds concentrates to it. Like a teaspoon of this is a dose of the electrolytes, but it will have also a serving, personal serving of concentrates. Okay. This is what we put in our distilled water for basic use. This is our favorite go-to quick, really healthy, extracted from the clean side of the Great Salt Lake source of electrolytes. It's very important that we chose this one because it's not high in calcium, not even so much as to list. And calcium creates cardiac artery calcium, kidney stones, arthritic deposits, constipation, and so forth. And most people have too much calcium that doesn't go to the right place and often goes in the wrong place. And that is why it basically doesn't have the minerals to make it work. Might not even have the stomach acid to assimilate the other minerals to make that calcium behave and go where it should go and get out of where it should get out of. So that's really important, is to watch out for all the other otherwise good or effective electrolytes. They may work really well, but you may be building up too much calcium in some really bad places. So the trick, the super hack that I have to thank Dr. Boz, that's Dr. B-O-Z, that's the name of her channel, Dr. Annette Bosworth. I have to thank her for, because even though I've been on maintenance for quite a long time, I've been playing around more with more drastic intermittent fasting for the sake of just refreshing my body cells and doing general overall healing and prevention. And I have often done one meal a day, and sometimes it's at 3 or 4 o'clock, even though I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning. And when you are trying to extend your fasting time, even if it's just until 11 o'clock in the morning, when you want to extend that and you're starting to feel hungry, you're probably a little low in electrolytes, because if had you eaten, you would have gotten some electrolytes that way. So here's a little hack. The real salt made by Redmond, which I use in bulk. I have this container just for my husband's work because it's convenient, okay? Which I keep around in bulk like this. The real salt is my favorite salt. I've used it since the year 2000, and I have a video on my ketogenic playlist with Dr. Ken Berry and the guy who wrote The Salt Fix. And it is both theirs and many other functional medicine doctors' favorite, because it's from the clean side of the Great Salt Lake, and it is very pure and unpolluted and extremely balanced in minerals, actually more balanced and a little higher in iodine than the Celtic salt and the Himalayan salt. This is the hack. And I usually chase this with some lemon water with this in it, which I didn't used to put in my lemon water because it wasn't made back then when I made that video called Ketogenic Drinks for Digestion. So you take a little salt like this, about this much, I don't know if you can see that, and you lick it. And then you take a swig of water, electrolyte water, lemon water, or lemon electrolyte water, and it's like, wow, where'd the hunger go? I feel good. Very similar to like if you work too hard out in the heat. That licking salt and taking salt with you is really important. It also prevents hyponatremia, which is when you drink a lot of water but you don't have enough salt to hold it in your body. And like my husband's had 2 episodes of that from exertion, and one was exertion and stress, where all of a sudden the blood pressure dropped, and we didn't realize it at first. That's why we like to have this around. It's about $39 through Amazon as a blood pressure machine. When his blood pressure has dropped like that, both during running and other activity, we first suspected that it was hyponatremia from a lot of fluid, but not enough salt. It's happened to him only twice, once on the paleo diet when he was running, and once this last year. And I gave him just a 1/4 teaspoon of this. I have a handy little 1/4 teaspoon scoop, and put that in a little bit of water. He drank it and he was normal, like fast. Like, I mean, he felt better immediately. So that's hyponatremia, and that's why I would suggest that everybody carry a little salt that you can lick, even if it's not because you're trying to fast at that time. The salt lick, or some salt in what you're drinking, up to easily a 1/4 teaspoon at a time, is a phenomenal hack and trick. And I won't let him go anywhere without salt. Now, the reason, by the way, his weight and his water and salt fluctuate more is because he started out 2 years ago as a type 2 diabetic, really bad hypoglycemia that would make him like drive off the road and wake up before he went in the ditch. It was pretty bad. And the reason for that is because his insulin state is not as healed as like mine, or as someone who doesn't have hyperinsulinemia, which is too high of insulin insensitivity, that whole package. And that is why his weight on the scale fluctuates like crazy. He can easily be 2 or 3 pounds different in one day, even if he didn't do anything different. And that is a really good clue, kind of reverse hack, not something to do, but something to know, where if your weight fluctuates that much, then you probably have a lot more healing to do in the area of insulin sensitivity. Okay, my reason I especially like this besides the fact that for about 13 bucks you get 48 servings. And if you buy it, be sure to shake it well because it does want to settle and it tells you to shake it well. I love that product because it is not high enough in calcium to list it. People have too much calcium in general, and the biggest cause of death is heart disease, and the biggest cause of heart disease is cardiac artery calcium. Calcium built up in the arteries. By the way, at our age, it's a high risk to have at least some excess calcium in your arteries. And for the HE double hockey sticks of it, we both had our CAC, coronary artery calcium score done, and we were both a 0, which is great. It gives us a lot of confidence to go into the future that we know that we did something right, and that was related to adding the K2 to the D3, which I'll go into a tad more later. So I highly suggest avoiding the electrolytes that also list a substantial amount of calcium. We do not generally ever need more calcium, is certainly not on a regular basis like that, and a lot of it is calcium carbonate, which is ground up limestone, and when it's not from food or the sea, the molecules are literally thousands of times too large and they get stuck like boulders. They get stuck, they don't go where they should go, and they go to bad places. So other conditions would make you want to take potassium that helps prevent or break up stones, and that is citrate, potassium citrate. Thus, the reason if you could be prone to stones, or if you want to keep your calcium solvent and you want to counteract oxalic acid that's in your vegetables, lemon juice, again, is a citrate, right? So, I'm going to show you this. Bulk Supplements has, I'm going to show you at the front of it. Just get it on Amazon. And potassium citrate. There are other good potassiums, but that particular one is very, very protective against a buildup of stones or excess calcium. And so is magnesium, which helps to make calcium behave. A good magnesium, which you can also get through the Doctor's Best brand and powder, and I like to avoid pills when I can, is, again, same brand, magnesium glycinate. And the reason for glycinate is it's very effective. It stays with you long, hardly ever is overly laxative. That's not the one to go to if you're looking for a laxative. And those two in electrolyte drinks, I make my husband drink that first thing in the morning. And we put them in little jars labeled like this. See? And he'll take a 1/4 teaspoon of each of those two, because magnesium is another electrolyte often lost. It is in this product, but this does not have potassium citrate. So we use some of this, and we use the magnesium glycinate, which is a very superior magnesium, and we also use the potassium citrate. Okay, hang on one second. Just to clarify one thing, since 40,000 volts is a new product, when I made my ketogenic drinks for digestion video, it didn't exist. And this is in all my water, even the animals' water or indoor plants. It's the same company and made by Trace Minerals Research. And this product is in everything they make. So a serving of this, which is a teaspoon, and there are 48 teaspoons for about 13 bucks, a serving of this contains a personal serving of concentrates. So that is why it is now in my ketogenic drinks for digestion, especially the electrolyte version, which is the one for in between meals. It is in that, and it couldn't have been in my video. And it's not in stores yet. One more thing about those electrolytes. As you adapt, you're going to need less. And you're going to have good days and bad days. And you're going to have to find your, my favorite ironic term for all these hacks in the ketogenic diet, is you're going to have to find your sweet spot. Regarding a lot of things I'm going to say, and I'm going to use that word again, because the sweet spot is where you've adjusted to at that point, and what works at that point. So you need to listen to your body, and there will be days when you need more of the electrolytes and days that you don't. And as time goes on, then you will use them much more minimally because your kidneys will have adapted to not throwing out so much of that water, and your body will adapt to holding on to more electrolytes. And you'll be able to tell by your blood pressure, you'll be able to tell by whether you're dehydrated or not, your energy level, and whether, hey, here's the other one. You'll be able to tell by how long you can do your intermittent fasting in between meals. Because if you run out of electrolytes, it's really hard to fast. The next topic is adaptation and phases. Number one critical tip, stay satiated. Especially if you're trying to do intermittent fasting. If you were too hungry before the next meal comes, learn to eat more the time before. Stay satiated in the beginning. Do not count calories. Do not worry about calories. Be extremely strict about keeping your total grams of carbs 20 grams or less, each gram having 4 calories. And because there are so many hidden carbs in so many things, you have to be a label Nazi. You have to read the hell out of those labels and know what every ingredient in is. Because, for example, I only trust certain stevias. This one, they're in my stevia video, the green one that I labeled, which is the pure leaf organic ground into a powder. And these two different sizes of the same thing made by Now, which has nothing but organic stevia extract, no additives, no fillers. One called New Stevia, the first ingredient is maltodextrin. MSG has about 20 different names, and one of them called modified food starch, or it might be tapioca starch, or this or that. You have to be really strict about your labels. And if you're going to fudge a little bit and you don't know what something means, you shouldn't be eating that many foods with that many ingredients anyway. Know exactly what they are, and don't assume that if it's fiber that the calories don't count, because fibers can really upset your guts. Sugar alcohols are not healthy for the guts. If they make the guts leak, then you're more toxic. And then nothing works right, and you don't feel as well, your nutrients go down, and you get closer to autoimmune disease. So you really need to try to do a purest version, in my view, so that you're not screwed with this. If you don't count your leafy vegetable, non-starchy vegetable carbs, as in the fiber, and the carbs that count as calories, if you don't count them, and I don't, because I don't screw around, I don't have to count them. But if you don't count them, I highly suggest keeping your total grams of carbs indefinitely at 15 or less, because you're going to get some in the vegetables too, and maybe that'll help cover for some of your accidental carbs. Okay. The macros, besides the 20 grams or less of total carbs, including fiber, at least counting the fiber where something says fiber. That's my point, actually. I want to make that clear. If something says fiber in it, and you're supposed to subtract it from the net carbs, but you also don't count the carbs in your green leafy vegetables, you could easily go out well over 20 grams. So again, if you count the fiber carbs, then you don't have to count the vegetable carbs, and then you won't tend to be so stingy with yourself with the vegetables. Okay. Normal protein. Nobody, the finest researchers, the finest functional medical doctors, all say that they cannot tell you how many grams of protein you're supposed to eat. A low guess is 1/2 gram or 0.6 for every pound you weigh. Another one is a whole gram for every pound you weigh. Again, we need that concept of sweet spot and adaptation. If you eat there's two things you need to know. If you eat too much protein, the excess protein can turn to sugar. So you don't want to go overboard. The thing you need to know about not eating enough protein is Here's your gauge. Hair, skin, and nails will show it because they will suffer. As a matter of fact, a body will try to hang on to muscle and it thinks it can, in the heart muscle, because it can spare these extremities more. It can spare protein and other places. It's pretty smart. It tries to protect the vital organs more. And, in other words, the muscles other than the heart would go first before the heart would. But hair, skin, and nails, those three things are a great guide to knowing whether you got too low of protein or not. And one other thing I must say, which I was going to mention when I talk about nutrients while we're on it, if you do not have enough stomach acid, the signals to your pancreas regarding insulin and glucagon, and the signals to your pancreas regarding excreting enzymes or even excreting the bicarbonate that needs to go into the small intestine after your food passed through the highly acidic stomach, those signals won't work unless you have enough stomach acid. So, and your protein won't work unless you have enough stomach acid. And your minerals will not be absorbed and assimilated, including electrolytes, unless you have enough stomach acid. So let's go upstream to stomach acids. And your stomach pH is supposed to be between 1 and 3. And if you think you're not assimilating your protein right, or you think that you're not excreting what needs to be excreted from the pancreas properly, then consider my ketogenic drinks for digestion, or even so far as to go and take hydrochloric acid, would be called betaine hydrochloride, as a supplement, something you're going to have to play with. But I had to throw that in there because it affects all the electrolytes and it affects the protein. And so we're talking about macros and normal protein. You're going to have to find that out, and it may change. If you suddenly had better stomach acid, then you might not eat as much because it might be much more efficient. Then the rest, besides approximately 20 total grams of carbohydrates and normal protein, I would say I do about in between 1/2 and 1 whole gram of protein per body weight. And by the way, I weigh 119 pounds, so that gives you an idea. Maybe around 60 grams a day, but I don't sweat it. I just eat what we call full fat protein, and I don't starve. The rest of your calories, so to speak, the rest of your macros is good fat, and that you will learn to get better and better. You're going to have to start out with some of your fat most likely being medium chain triglycerides for a little bit of a hack, but as time goes on, then people should start, as they need that less, then you can start to have more fats from animals like butter, cheese, hopefully grass-fed, organic, maybe even raw, like we get, ghee, clarified butter, and animal fat, like the fat literally on the animal. All of those have your A, D, and K. Some E is often from a variety of, you can get vitamin E from a lot of things, but those things there are very important. And in the beginning, you know how there are what do you call it, empty calories in carbohydrates? Well, in a sense, the MCT oil would be considered empty calories. They have a purpose and they're quite a hack, and they're, a great tool. But as you don't need them, and you don't need them to tide you over while you're trying not to eat breakfast, since they still count as calories and they technically you're not fasting when you consume that, then it's a good idea when you're more adapted, like me. I haven't consumed that since the first 3 months of this 2-year ketogenic diet, because I and my husband used it a little bit longer, but we wanted all of our fat calories to be from really high quality animal fat, so we can get the essential fatty acids from them, and also the fat-based vitamins. So next, this is really important here. The dawn phenomenon. To mitigate that, some of it takes time. The dawn phenomenon is when no matter what you ate the day before or the week or month before, the dawn phenomenon causes you to wake up with higher sugar. And it doesn't seem to make any sense. Shouldn't it be the lowest? What's going on over there? Excuse me, the dawn phenomenon was interrupted by a biological need of my dog Lilu. Okay, back to the dawn phenomenon. If your daytime blood sugar is normally normal, preferably like in the 80s or even a little bit less, but you wake up with blood sugar that is like, just under or over 100, that is called the dawn phenomenon. When you're more insulin resistant and I'm going to mention the other reasons for it. When your liver can't make ketones as well, if you didn't sleep as well and your circadian rhythm is screwed up from either not getting enough sun, which helps it, and getting too much light, especially electronic light at night, or you're stressed and your adrenal glands make cortisol. All of those things make your liver make more sugar. If you're not making ketones well enough to prevent the dawn phenomenon to run on ketones, your liver may actually make more sugar. And it does get much better. My husband used to wake up with his sugar being a little over 100, and now a high day is in like the low to mid 90s. And it quickly goes down. So that is a telltale sign of progress. And by checking your blood sugar first thing in the morning, occasionally, you can see how you're doing on that. And it's a direct relation to how much your liver is over making sugar in the morning. You're supposed to have a little higher sugar in the morning anyway, because that's when your adrenals say wake up, and they think that in order to wake up, especially if you haven't eaten all night and maybe part of the day before, then you're going to need more sugar then. But when it's too high, not diabetic high necessarily, but when it's too high, that's called the dawn phenomenon. That there, if you just keep doing strict keto, that will get better and better. Okay. Indications that you are adapting really well in these phases are cravings, the amount of energy and strength that you have, and endurance. The amount of deep sleep was a fantastic topic. This fitness watch here, it's not the expensive name brand. It actually is from Amazon. What was the brand of this again? I always forget. It's a new toy. I forgot. Anyway, it has 4.5 stars and it's really good. I'm asking my husband, can you get the name of that one? I forgot again. He'll get the name of that one. I love it because it tracks. I don't care about the heart rate because my heart rate's always good. And when I work out, I can hardly get it up very high because it's very efficient. But it tracks the amount of deep sleep that you got. And there are times when I was only in bed 5 hours, but I got 3 hours of deep sleep. And it's a good indication of how adapted you are, because my husband gets more sleep than me, more time actually sleeping than I do, and yet he gets less deep sleep. So it's another way to track your progress. Here we go. That one there. We love it. We got him one. I got him one for Father's Day, and then he got me one for a very belated Mother's Day because it was so impressive to track your sleep that he wanted me to have one too. And I got a pink one so I can tell it apart from his. Of course, you can, at any time, it tracks other things like steps and so forth, other athletic things, but at any time you can also check your heart rate. Okay, now, I had to mention that when I mentioned deep sleep. The ability to do intermittent fasting is a fantastic indicator. It's like a hack test, because as you get much better, and especially if you keep your sweet spot with your electrolytes, you can do intermittent fasting much easier. This is a really interesting note because I'm really well adapted. I'm sure I'm not insulin resistant at all anymore, or hypoglycemic, but I don't want to find out by going back on carbohydrates, high carbs, ever. I keep mine even on maintenance below 20 grams of total carbs. But when I first get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I used to have that little MCT oil by 10 or 11 o'clock, or a meal by 10 or 11 o'clock. Now I eat usually on average at about my first meal, and sometimes my only meal, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is really interesting because as the day goes on, I'm making better and better ketones. And it's weird, you think you get hungrier, or you think you get more uncomfortable. But by the time 3 o'clock comes around, it's like I'm only eating because I'm supposed to. it's like the hunger goes way down. The mental clarity, which is a sign of adaptation in general, but you can especially tell when you're doing intermittent fasting, the mental clarity goes up and the energy goes up. And I do some of my best studying and just a mental capability the longer I've actually fasted that day. That's a fantastic test to see where you are in your adaptation phase. Okay, let's see what else. Memory. I mentioned memory in one of my last videos. My memory at 60 years old is truly better than ever. I can just, it's like, it just seems to remember things that flabbergast me. Mood and your ability to handle stress is another indicator. Pain. I have a recent injury, but out of my older injuries that used to hurt, basically because the ketones are anti-inflammatory, and high insulin and sugar are both inflammatory. So that gives you a real clue as to your pain level relative to what you're dealing with, and inflammation. Those are guides again. Those are meters. Agility. When I was on paleo for 9 years, I still couldn't bounce up off the floor really fast like a young kid, like rolling around with the dogs on the floor or reaching something on a low shelf. It would take, with old knee damage and things like that, it would take a little work to get back up. But now it's just like it's like ageless as far as the agility goes. My husband has been able to do things in the heat, work outside for 8 hours straight that he couldn't have endured for 1 hour before without being basically out of it and incapacitated as far as work goes for the rest of the day. Of course, measurements, and we're going to talk more about the coolest way to measure soon, about the Keto Mojo. The scale will eventually show it, but interestingly, I got down to a size 4, which I reported in my last video, but really I fit into some size 2s. And when I went from size 6 to size 4, normally, and with my body, I'm 5'7" and have a big build, normally it would be 10 or 15 pounds difference to bring it up or down a pant size. It was like 3 to 5 pounds between those two pant sizes. And if you continually if you're checking your muscles, a good way to check your muscles besides themselves and the way they can work and what strength you have is hair, skin, and nails. I might have mentioned that already because they're a sign of how well your protein is doing. One of the first places your body will expend it and get and use it when it desperately needs it, if it's not getting enough, is the periphery, basically your hair, skin, and nails that are more expendable than, say, muscles. And the heart muscle, it would spare even more so because it's a vital organ. Let's see. I mentioned cravings, but also hunger. Cravings for carbs or sugars have been long gone in this household. But hunger itself, and when you're, which shows a great test, is how long you can go when you're intermittent fasting. I mentioned before too, the more insulin resistant you are, or diabetic, type 1 or type 2, on the scale your weight is going to fluctuate more. Mine fluctuates maybe by 1 pound throughout the day or from one day to the next. My husband's often, of course, he's still somewhat insulin resistant. My husband, and of course this is anecdotal, but this is a good guide. My husband's weight can easily fluctuate 3 or 4 pounds in a day. And even though that his waist has gotten smaller and his muscles have gotten bigger, generally throughout, the longer we've done all of this, the easier it all gets, the higher the metabolism, the more he has shrunk where he wants to shrink and built up where he wants to build up. So keep that in mind. When you have more weight fluctuation, you are more insulin resistant or diabetic. I am now going to tell you about my second favorite biohack, but the most important testing. When you do some of the recommended tests for insulin and blood sugar by the medical community and even by people who teach the ketogenic diet, basically, except for the one I'm going to tell you, which is awesome that you can do at home, they're tunnel vision snapshots. For example, let's take the A1C, which is the average blood sugar for the last few months. If you're anemic or you have an infection, then your white blood count and your red blood count are out of whack. And if you're testing the sugar on that hemoglobin, that's why it's called hemoglobin A1C, then it won't be accurate. It could look better or worse than it really is. It has its purpose, but know that it's a snapshot that you have to go to the doctor for, and it's testing it at that moment for at least the average of the last few months. But anemia and infection and other things can affect its accuracy. The HOMA-IR is, again, one that you have to go to the doctor for and pay, and that will test fasting insulin. But you could have low insulin as a diabetic type 1 or type 2, or with normal or healthy metabolism, and it doesn't say a whole lot. If it's high in the morning or fasting, it's not good, and that is an indicator. But the HOMA-IR does not show insulin fluctuations throughout the day. You can have a great healthy metabolism, and it's supposed to shoot up somewhat when you eat, but then it's supposed to quickly come back down and stay level. But the people who are metabolically compromised, we're not talking about type 1 diabetics because they're putting the insulin in. But when you're insulin resistant, and even if you're doing low carb at first, but especially if you're not, it may shoot up and never come down, hardly at all. And if you only test fasting insulin, that's the only picture you're getting. And a lot of people with completely different metabolism show a very similar HOMA-IR fasting insulin. Now, the ultimate test, if you're going to a doctor and you're paying money for a test, is the Kraft Test. Of course, on my low carb for diabetes playlist and on the ketogenic playlist, I have that clearly explained. And the Kraft Test will test it gives you about 75 grams of glucose to react to, and it tests your reaction to it, and it has its value, but it will test it at different intervals, mainly the second hour interval, which really gives you a much better picture than just fasting insulin. And if your second hour interval is not that great, then you need to wait and do the 5 hour interval to see how well the insulin came back down to normal and how it handled that sugar. And it's a lot of trouble. It'd be fun to do the Kraft Test if it was convenient. However, it's not as good as what I'm about to tell you. But what the Kraft Test did is it tested almost 15,000 people, and that's one I mentioned before, that found that they set the type 1 diabetics aside and they took everybody else. And because of course the type 1 diabetics will have a certain pattern. But of the rest of the people, the 100% of the rest of the people who had normal blood sugar had high insulin, were insulin resistant / diabetic. So I thank Dr. Kraft and Ivor Cummins, who's really promoted his information, and I have their videos also on those two playlists I just mentioned. I thank Dr. Kraft for all the work he did, and this was done decades ago too, while people are more insulin resistant and more metabolically sick now than they were then. And even then, 75% of the people with normal blood sugar had high insulin, had insulin resistance. So that testing on so many people was so valuable. The other thing they did is they found out that Kraft studies also found out that approximately 80% of people with heart disease are diabetic. And so it all has to do with the effect of the insulin on damaging all the whole cardiovascular system, all the blood vessels. Okay, so here is the coolest thing. Where'd it go? Can I have that Keto Mojo? The coolest hack and test, an indicator of your progress, even relative to being able to check how your insulin and blood sugar and ketones are doing, is the Keto Mojo combined with the Dr. Boz ratio. Here is the device that has its strips. the Keto Mojo, which tests both glucose and ketones. It does not directly test your insulin, but here's the coolest thing about using the Keto Mojo, and you're supposed to do it first thing in the morning, and then possibly at other times later in the day to see how you're doing relative to what you did or what you ate. You know the glucose ketone index, the GKI, that there is comparing the rate of one to the other, and it is reflecting your state of your insulin sensitivity. And it's a lot of math, and it really confuses a lot of people. But what dear Dr. Annette Bosworth, called Dr. Boz on her channel with a Z, did is she made the math more simple and made it so easy to figure out your ketones, your glucose, and its reflection on your insulin health and sensitivity based on a really simple formula. So, and it must be done first thing in the morning. You can do it later too if you want. The Keto Mojo costs about $1 a strip for the ketone strips, and about 17 cents for the glucose strips. And there are other brands, usually more expensive, and we find that this one works really great. Here's how it goes. This is so fun. You take your glucose, let's say it were 80, and divide it by your ketones. And let's say they were just 1. Then all you do is you come up with the number 80, right? 80 divided by 1. If you, let's say your ketones were 2, then your Dr. Boz ratio would be 40. And on and on. But here is the guide, and this relates to the more complicated math of doing the more, the harder to do glucose ketone index. She basically just consolidated the math. This is how it goes. If you have ketones at all, like above 0.5, you're making ketones seriously, and you must be in some kind of ketosis. That's just a flat thing to know. If you are 80 or below, that would be like if your blood sugar was 80 and you're making 1, this ketone score is 1, then you are basically below 80 or at 80 or below. You are in fat burning, not substantial immune boosting, but you're in fat burning. Let's say you were the 40. Okay, let's say you had blood glucose of 80, but you had your ketones were 2. Your score, your ratio, the Dr. Boz ratio is 40. 40 and below are substantially immune boosting, and just a substantial autophagy. That's the teardown of the cells that need to be replaced and using their parts to build new ones. If you want to do things like fight cancer or very serious diseases, and not just fix your metabolism, lose weight, or help your immune system, but you want to go hardcore, then you need a score of 20 or below. That's very hard to do. One day, we had company, and we didn't eat till 4 o'clock, and I hadn't eaten any calories at all. And I ate at 4 o'clock, and we tested everybody's. We tested our company's ketones and blood sugar too, and mine was a 17 point something, and I felt no stress whatsoever by doing that level of intermittent fasting. I had some good calories after that, but that's an example of my ketones. I believe they were 2.9 or 2.6 at that time. So I don't worry about them. I pretty much save the test strips for my husband because he's the one who needs to still heal more and make all that progress. But the great thing about this is your numbers, either hopefully under 80, maybe under 40, and if you're really hardcore, under 20, which takes a lot more fasting, your numbers are a reflection of your insulin sensitivity. And that's not a snapshot. That's not tunnel vision, and it can cost you $1 per ketone strip. The whole kit, where the box go. This comes with ketone strips and glucose strips for right around $50 on Amazon, and then you can buy more strips after that. And it's like it didn't cost that much, and I can do it at home. To save money, I don't test myself that much anymore. Just kind of wanted to see where I was at, and occasionally do that. But it's you don't have to go to the doctor. You're not getting a snapshot. you're paying very, very, very little. You can do it at home, and you can do it and track, like, okay, if I ate a certain way, or I had certain activities or certain lack of sleep, you can see how your insulin's doing, because that above or below 80, that above or below 40, and that above or below 20 are a reflection, because you're comparing the glucose to the ketones, which is a great reflection on how your insulin situation is doing. And that I thank Dr. Boz greatly for, because it's an at-home test that's not tunnel vision. It's not a snapshot, but you can take all the shots you want at home, so to speak, and you can get a good look at it and judge what you're doing, and, like, by what you're doing and how you're doing. One more note about ketone tests: you can go to the drugstore and get really cheap urine ketone tests. And I believe that all of my favorite functional medicine doctors and we here at home agree that it shows what you're wasting in your urine. And the better you get at burning ketones, the less you're going to waste. But its purpose is for when you're just starting out. If you don't want to blow the money on a buck strip to test your ketones by blood, of course, the Keto Mojo, of course, is a blood test. If you don't want to do that, you test your urine ketones, because at some point you're not producing ketones at all, and at some point you are. And you're testing in the beginning, or if you fell off and you started again, you're testing to see when you began to make ketones again. It's a really cheap way to do it. We never bothered with that, because by the time we got around to testing it, we were further along. We just bought the Keto Mojo. But it's great. You can just go to the drugstore and see, are you making ketones? And then again, don't go by how many you see. It just means you're making ketones. And if you kept progressing and you saw the number of ketones goes down, it's just because you're using them. And that key there to how that works is your mitochondria have to be trained to use the ketones. It's not just about making the ketones. They have to be trained to literally learn to use them. So that's why if your diet stayed the same and you did a good ketogenic diet and you had a bunch dump into your urine in the beginning, it's because your mitochondria weren't using them that well. A quick note about MCT oil before I get to my most favorite and exciting biohack. Okay. As you know, it means medium chain triglycerides, and it doesn't really need any help from the digestion to be turned into ketones. And it's really, really useful in the beginning to, and also for other people with other brain disorders, brain starvation, you name it, Alzheimer's disease, epilepsy, on and on and on. Anywhere, any place, and under any condition you need quicker energy, especially diabetics. I know a little young diabetic kid who likes to take shots of MCT oil because it's fuel when he's so screwed up from his diabetes. It makes him feel better. But all of those things, including the adaptation to the ketogenic diet, has a use for MCT oil. As I mentioned earlier, we eventually replaced all fat with really super high nutrient dense pasture raised fat. But except for some olive oil, which is not from an animal. Okay, let me give you a quick, in case you don't already know the difference, a quick education on which are which. Coconut oil, there's one. Coconut oil is about 60 to 70% MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides. And because they're not a long chain, they burn quickly. They are used quickly. Well, real long chains take a lot more work for your body to use. Okay. This one here has the full array of MCT oil, all the different types, but it has a lot more lauric acid, and it has some other fatty acids that are not even medium chain triglycerides. It has its purpose. We used to use this when we saute grass-fed beef, but we don't even use that anymore. We use ghee instead because we didn't need this just as empty calories, and the MCT, the ghee is going to provide nutrients from grass-fed organic dairy minus the casein and the lactose. So most people who are allergic to dairy can handle it. Okay, now these two compared, we're going to go down the line. By the way, this Now brand MCT oil now has a new label, and it's now unfortunately in a plastic bottle. Okay, this Now brand is all MCT oil. This is 60, like any other decent coconut oil, 60 to 70%. This is all MCT oil. However, it is a caprylic, capric, and lauric acid. And the lauric acid is not an efficient ketone maker. And the lauric acid, the drawback of that is it's more laxative. This type of MCT oil makes a very good prank. I know somebody, not my husband, but somebody who did it to somebody in their coffee and put 4 tablespoons in it to watch the person dash to the bathroom the rest of the workday. So yes, you would wish this on your worst enemy in high doses. Okay, now these two are competitors. See the Clean MCT, which you can get on Amazon, and the Bulletproof Brain Octane. Bulletproof makes a different one too that's less potent than this one, but I'm not even dealing with that right now. These two are all caprylic acid. They, out of all the medium chain triglycerides here, these only contain the shortest of those chains. Whoops. These only contain the shortest of those chains, which are A, the quickest to turn into ketones, and B, the least laxative. Of course, they cost more. This brand, Bulletproof, makes one called XCT oil, which is caprylic and capric, minus the lauric. But the price is proportionate, and it's really best to just go straight, if you can afford it, because you use less and you get less laxative effect, to go straight to the one that's just caprylic acid. Now for my most exciting and fun biohack. It's beta-hydroxybutyrate. This brand here is the one that we've been using. I didn't even bother trying other brands, which I was going to, but this one is half the price of the other brands. And it has no sweetener but stevia, and it does not have the gums, fibers that you don't need and your guts don't need, that all of the other ones I've seen do. Some even have artificial sweeteners. Okay, about beta-hydroxybutyrate, known as BHB. It's exogenous, coming from the outside, ketones. And what is the purpose and who benefits? There are people who can't adapt well, or they have brain starvation. If you have Parkinson's, if you have dementia, oftentimes if you have ADD or ADHD, but especially Alzheimer's, which is known as type 3 diabetes, you have brain starvation. Literally, the brain can't, in certain conditions, cannot even absorb and assimilate sugar, glucose, or you're so insulin screwed up that you can't get it in the cells, and the brain cells die, and it's like, this is like goes along with people being increasingly diabetic with every decade, and with it being not an epidemic but a pandemic in the world. And nobody had Alzheimer's when I was a kid. None of the old people. Yeah, a little bit off, when you get older, but it's nothing like it is now. So it is also a treatment for them because they're already ketones. So they have purposes for everything mental ability, even if you're doing well. They are ketones ready to use for your entire body. So keep that in mind for any kind of stress, any kind of mental issue. But number one, adaptation. We did not initially use them to adapt because they're made in a lab, and we did find, because we're so disciplined, we didn't need to use them. However, now that I know that, because I have my husband use them, and even at this stage, because he's still somewhat insulin resistant, as evidenced by the still somewhat of the dawn phenomenon and so forth, and easier to get hyponatremia, which I've mentioned. Those are clues. Those are kind of a knowledge hack, and because of fluctuation in blood pressure and his issue, like remember the thing about whether your weight varies too much from one day to the next and so forth. They help you adapt. And until you're more adapted, remember I mentioned before about training the mitochondria, like the concept of when you pee out too many ketones because you're not using them. Well, to train the mitochondria to adapt anywhere in your body, to adapt to using ketones for fuel. When they here's the thing, there's been famine in the land, right? They haven't been there. They don't know how to use them. Your whole system is running in a rut. So when you put the ketones in, even if you're not doing, great progress yet on your ketogenic diet, by putting those ketones in, you are, even before you can make your own, you are training your mitochondria to use them. It's a bridge, it's a leg up, it's a hump over. And wow, what a difference it makes in someone who's still insulin resistant at all. I've tried them and I got hardly, maybe just a little more brain activity, but this one here has 16 doses, like they all do. And this one's like $29, $30, right? All the rest of them are about $59. Even the one Dr. Boz makes, the name brands, the kind you find in your, like your regular health food stores, generally not this one. Those there are still 16 servings and right around $59, $60. This one is half the cost and has less junk. It doesn't have any junk in it at all. And we have found that it's fantastic. Here's the thing though. You know that thing about the electrolytes to sip it because you use it slowly? Well, this can be laxative. So what you want to do is start out with maybe a quarter of a scoop. There's 16 scoops in here. Maybe a quarter and test yourself and see how laxative it is. Of course, it's going to be relative to everything else you may have done that may be laxative. If I had known about this, we would have probably skipped the MCT oil altogether. And I, of course, like I mentioned, I have no affiliation, make not one penny on any of these products in any conceivable way. I do not monetize my channel. This is just like a reference library, my channel. But these are absolutely worth the money. And it's great for that postponing your eating, great for that when you didn't get enough sleep, great for that adaptation. And by using these, when we used these in the past few months, that's when my husband became Superman outside in the heat with his chores. I mean, it was just like a different guy, even relative to being keto for a couple years. One more suggestion about BHB. Some are just ketone salt, where the BHB is bonded to salt. Some have other electrolytes. This one has electrolytes, but not potassium. And so it would be important to either take the 40,000 volts, or that potassium citrate, which is protective against calcium buildup and stones because it's citrate. You may want to add that to this for utter perfection. Some do have potassium in them. Some are lousy when it comes to what electrolytes they're bonded to, and some are pretty good. But overall, because of the price and because it is clean, we chose this one. And besides, we eat potassium-rich food. We drink dandelion salads. We use the potassium citrate, and it's in the lemons that we use too, and it is in the 40,000 volts. I have a quick note about certain crises that could come up, and quick tips and tricks and hacks for them. First of all, if you're trying to increase your workouts and you can't recover, it is clear that it's most likely adrenal, and it is clear that you cannot handle that level of working out. The big clue as to whether you worked out too hard or too long is your recovery. You should recover at least in a day or two, generally feeling. If you are wiped out after the workout or the next day, it is too much. And so it'd be better to do something, move around, but it'd be better to do something moderate. So that's a big clue as to whether you weren't ready for that. One thing that, since Candida loves carbs and sugars, one thing that our world, especially this country, is plagued with is Candida yeast overgrowth, because it feeds on the carbs and the sugars. And of course, people take too many antibiotics, and the antibiotics kill the good guys, and then the bad guys, the low level yeast we're supposed to have, gets out of hand. So just kind of keep that in mind. You might go through a Candida die-off, and it's not the Candida that make you feel sick. It's their waste matter. Basically, their poop and their pee. So, and when you suddenly have a bunch of dead bodies versus just, them dying little by little and, and regrowing, then you have a whole bunch of their toxins. And so I just wanted to show you a few hacks, tricks for die-off. When I had chronic Lyme disease and I was killing it, doing really well, and by the way, any nerve damage left over was, the ketogenic diet did more for that in 3 months than anything, And I basically pretty much killed it off, but I still have nerve damage. And so keep that in mind for all kinds of healing. And just because of that is one of the reasons why I like to do intermittent fasting, even though I'm on maintenance. Okay, Zeobind is a very safe zeolite because it's extra high in silica. I don't have time to go into it right now. I did mention it on my Critical Facts About Minerals video, which is on a playlist called Critical Mineral Facts. It has my videos, and also mine is really old, but it has videos made by others too that are really great. And the whole playlist is called Critical Mineral Facts. I mentioned it there. You can go see how it's to be used and why it works. I don't have time to go in it right now. This one is approved by Dr. It doesn't own the company or profit from it, but it's BioPure is the brand, and it's approved by Dr. Cleanheart, and it basically neutralizes toxins and heavy metals. And anytime anyone's had food poisoning, or the dogs got into the compost, or the cat got into the fish fertilizer, and they're really sick to their guts, take this and poof, as soon as it reaches it, it neutralizes it. So there could be a lot of waste matter from Candida, and that's something to consider. Only rule with this, for you to mix it with water, and it's not to come in contact with metal. Okay, because it'll attract the metal itself. So you use plastic and glass for it. Okay, another hack here is chlorophyll. And I dealt with that in a lot of my greens videos, and also on that minerals video that I just spoke of. And chlorophyll is plant blood. It chelates, or like the way I described it in that one video, is these are toxins floating around. The chlorophyll comes in contact, attaches, changes the molecule, and it's not that toxic molecule anymore. And chlorophyll is unique in that it passes the blood-brain barrier to go in there, and also neutralizes toxins. It's also a superfood. It basically has pretty much everything but carbs. Like one of the most all-around, other than like what it has over seaweed is protein and essential fatty acids. What seaweed has over it is that it has all of the minerals in perfect balance from the sea that are missing on land. Spirulina, the blue-green algae, is freshwater seaweed, and I would not use it unless it was organic. I like this brand, and it comes in a more economical bottle that I actually use to refill this. You don't have to taste it by taking the pills like this, because it tastes like a dirty aquarium. And I have a video called Most Critical Supplement that's about seaweed and what we're missing on land from the sea. Okay, other things, which my husband, we all take this. The dogs take powdered spirulina, but just because it's a daily detox. My husband is still on this, and it's almost been 2 years, because he had the fatty liver, the hump on the liver and the fatty liver, and every sign of fatty liver, and he's doing great. But still, until that liver's flat, and until his metabolism is perfect, like mine. This is the brand I trust. the most, Gaia, Gaia, and they're changing their labels now. They're right in the process of it. Their liver cleanse. There's other products for the liver. This one I think is the best because it not only has the milk thistle, it has a lot of supportive herbs that also help the other participating organs get it all the way out and not recircled back into the blood. And you don't want leaky gut, and that's one of the reasons I don't like all these supplements and these sugar alcohols and these other gums and fibers that can create leaky gut. And thereby you can't poop out your toxins as well because they leak through the gut, get back in the bloodstream, and they try to cycle and circle all over again. It's like coming down the liver, and then they're trying to come out the chute. And then if the guts leak, they loop back around. Does that make sense? Coming down, and they may loop back around. So this helps the other organs also get it the rest of the way out so it doesn't recircle or recycle. This one here, NAC, is the biggest glutathione booster. It doesn't have to be this brand. I just like what they did. Doctor's Best seems to add that little tweak to it just to make it just a little bit better than the guys next to him on the shelves. And it's a great liver detox. As a matter of fact, some people kind of use it as a hack who otherwise kind of sort of do health food and they drink, and it helps detox the liver from the drinking, which I don't advise. But it's a good pair to take one every morning, first thing, and one before bed. I did this a little bit in the beginning, but again, put the dollars toward my husband since I didn't have a fatty liver. This is my last main section, but it's some really important things about nutrition. First of all, read the damn labels. Don't put anything in your mouth that you don't understand and that shouldn't go in your mouth. Labels are full of lies. That is number one. Read the labels thoroughly. And even the word natural flavoring can mean anything. I went and I will sometimes call a company and find out what went into their natural flavors to find out, how are they really natural? Are they just because like belladonna is natural, foxglove is natural, Anyway, here's a big warning. Do not go by the glycemic index, especially when it comes to fruit. It's a dirty little secret that the fruit is rated basically 0 on the glycemic index. You know why? Because the fruit cannot be immediately be used as sugar fuel in your whole body. It can only go one place, to the liver. And if the liver can't use it, it stores as liver fat. So that is why fruit, because I made a video called Fruit on a Ketogenic Diet because I think I'm so against it, except like lemon juice. So don't flirt with berries. That's just like, the fruit these days has been perverted, even if it's organic, to be bigger, plumper, and sweeter. And it's not supposed to be around year-round. It's supposed to be there only in season in the wild. It would be really tiny and sour, and you wouldn't be very interested in it. So this glycemic index issue with fruit it's actually worse because it only can be processed by your liver. And have you ever heard of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Well, this little fruits and vegetables phrase it's okay. It wouldn't be called that. People wouldn't be attracted to it if it was really the kind of fruit that's found out in the wild. So I don't even want to get going on that. That's a big fat lie, this glycemic index thing. If it's something like fructose that goes straight to the liver to deal with, of all places. Okay. The other major suggestion is, as you may have heard me say, I'm not fond of kale. A lot of people really can't digest it well. Here it is in 3 words. Drink compatible salads. You can chew them too, but if you take your salads and if they're compatible, first of all, by drinking, you put them in a blender with water and you drink it, you are going to really ease up pressure on your guts. And you shouldn't be putting anything down there that it really isn't mashed really well, you didn't chew really well, because really that level of fiber is not a necessary nutrient at all. And neither are carbs. And it's just a suggestion because it's so much more powerful, more assimilated, because it's all mashed up when you drink your salads, and so much gentler on the guts. Let's just say if you want extra power, if you want to max it out, drink them instead of chew them. I mean, maybe except for when you're out at someone's place. You may not just throw it in their blender or go to the restaurant's blender and throw it in there. But I mean, when you can. I mean, if you want a good hack, I mean, if you want a good tip, drink your salads. And make sure they're a variety of the friendly vegetables. Easy on the crucifers. That's like kale, cabbage, not so much cabbage, but especially kale, broccoli, and cauliflower. The crucifers, if done in excess, sorry, Dr. Berg, but if done, no, they're good for the liver and the liver cleansing and the gallbladder and all that and the bile flow, but they don't have to be crucifers. The crucifers kind of ruin, if you get them too high, they kind of deplete iodine. Now, if you want to do a substantial amount of crucifers, all you have to do is eat organic seaweed, and there you're getting your iodine, which we do anyway, and I did a whole video on that. So I'm not going to go into that. Let's see here. Next is minimize nuts and seeds. First of all, they are filled with anti-nutrients. They come out the way you swallow them. Yeah, there's a lot of waste and just a lot of big chunks that just go through you. But most of all, it's the carb issue. Two of them aren't really even a nut. Peanut's a bean, and a cashew is a bean. A cashew is really high in carbs, and there's a lot of things in it that aren't good for you. So minimize nuts and seeds, A. B, choose them well. The most friendly to keto would be macadamia, pecan, and walnut. The most friendly to keto is pumpkin seeds out of the seeds. I mean, just think they're a squash seed anyway, right? And if you can, lightly toast, dehydrate, because that's a certain amount of heat too, or sprout them, you're going to digest them better. Yeah, you'll kill some enzymes, which actually all the things that are hard on your body, you're going to really minimize by doing that. We do a little macadamia nuts, and we used to use them in the beginning. I even pulled them out of my fat bomb, the one called Decadent Keto Dessert. They're not in there anymore, and we get organic pumpkin seeds in bulk, and we lightly toast them, and they digest really well, and they chew really well because they're not the fibers kind of toasted and really broken up. And they taste better that way. About your fat bombs. Fat bombs. They need to be well-timed and nutritious, if at all possible. Here's the cool thing about fat bombs. We used to use them as we were preparing our food, when we were less adapted. And we used to use them to subdue our appetite and, makes you eat less. And it's like, it takes so many minutes for your body to recognize that you ate something. And if you went straight to your bigger meal, you could be pretty far into it before you, or too hungry to start before it hits your system and you realize you're getting satiated. So since we don't want to pick, right? We don't want to stimulate insulin in between meals. The best time for fat bombs is either just before you eat, while you're putting your food together, and it really subdues your appetite and makes you feel better while you're waiting for your food. Or if you want them as dessert. And here's how it could be really important to use them as dessert. If you want to go a long time before you're going to eat again, or even if it's not a really long time, but you're not that adapted yet. If, let's say, the advice is, if you got too hungry too soon, you're tempted to snack, you should have eaten more with a meal before it. So that's when you would have it as dessert at the end of the meal to assure you got enough fat so that you can go as long as you happen to choose to go before that next meal. And plus, since I'm on maintenance, I'm not trying not to lose weight. Sometimes if my fat was a little lower than ideal during that meal, I'll just have 2 little pieces of my fat bomb. They were called Decadent Keto Dessert No Bake Cinnamon version. And then I made another video on how I changed them called My Best Fat Bombs Yet, I believe it was. Anyway, My Best Fat Bombs. No protein smoothies. This culture of protein smoothies makes me want to strangle whoever came up with it, because what is it typically? It is typically protein isolates, often combined with fruit, and it's not a full fat protein concept. And when you get excess protein, or protein that doesn't digest very well, that's not accompanied with fat, your body is going to tend to take that excess protein and just turn it to sugar, and you won't have the fat to carry you and the fat to make ketones from. But there is one exception to a protein supplement, as in supplement, not as a meal, which is the collagen peptides. I've tried, okay, first of all, we have bone broth protein, which is part collagen, and not necessarily non-GMO, not necessarily grass-fed. And then we have collagen that's not in the peptide form. And peptides are when it's broken down or hydrolyzed into small little pieces so that they're building blocks absolutely ready to use and ready to help heal a leaky gut with which to digest other nutrients too. So of all the collagen peptides that I've tried, and the peptides being the best form because they're already disassembled. Your body doesn't need to disassemble them into little peptide amino acid pieces first when they're already peptides, right? So I'm going to flash a couple brands I tried. There's one. And here's another one. And they, like every other one but my favorite, do not stir very well, like in cool or lukewarm water or cold water, because they're not hydrolyzed well enough to be brought down into small enough peptides, even though they may call themselves collagen peptides. The winner by far, and the winner according to everybody I know too, that are both grass-fed and very well hydrolyzed into peptide form, is Vital Proteins by far. And I've used them during my ketogenic diet because, not so much during maintenance, but because when you lose fat and skin may hang some, at first, there was a little maybe hanging over the top of the bikini, which I can now wear, and things like that, where my husband got a little bit of a chicken neck, and then the chicken neck pulled back in, tightened back up. For example, the peptides are very, very, as grass-fed, like Vital Proteins, are very, very useful in rebuilding and tightening that skin. And even your bones are supposed to be half protein. So this leads me to one other thing. Do you know that collagen cannot even work and become the protein in your body like it's supposed to at all without vitamin C? And I mean real food vitamin C, not this synthetic, really non-vitamin C that's called ascorbic acid. Real vitamin C has all kinds of different aspects to it from food. The best sources being raw, not heated, dark green leafy vegetables, another reason to drink your salads. And the other ketogenic friendly source would be raw lemons or limes. Anything else would have too much sugar or would have it been destroyed by heat. So here's a really cool fact. Sugar competes with the same openings or receptors as vitamin C, and of course carbs turning to sugars. So therefore, not just the high insulin or the insulin fluctuation, the abnormalities that would be in a diabetic too, directly cause damage to the blood vessels, but the sugar, the carbs/sugar, actually interferes with the very vitamin C that you need to get the very collagen there to build your tissues. So all the more, there's another reason why to bring your carbs down to 20 grams or less if you want to rebuild your body and tighten back up as you lose fat. I'm going to flash you 3 books real quickly. This is one by Dr. Joseph Kraft, Diabetic Epidemic in You. I pretty much have the equivalent from him and his combination with Ivor Cummins on several videos. Basically, the book is covered by that. And he is one guy, among others, who points out the fact that high insulin or diabetes creates low testosterone and therefore low libido. And so, if you want really good hormones, that's something you want to straighten out, because even women need testosterone for libido, and our hormones have been much better, and we're happy about that on the ketogenic diet, because another cause or another result of high insulin is PED, penile erectile dysfunction. So all these men who are looking for Viagra and saw palmetto and all tribulus and all the yohimbe and all these herbs that are supposed to help them get it up and keep it up, they're probably diabetic, or at least insulin resistant, and don't know it. So there's a suggestion for everything that testosterone is needed for by men and women, and also for your libido. Here's another book real quickly. This is, I mentioned Dr. Bernstein and how he has famous for decades for using a low-carb diet for diabetes. And when people follow his diet, they keep their blood sugars normal, and their insulin that they take in is minimized. So this is his book, Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solution. I have several of Dr. Bernstein's videos to give you the general gist of it and what he's doing and how to do it on my channel on Low Carb for Diabetes, that playlist called Low Carb for Diabetes, and even some on my ketogenic playlist. Regarding the the cardiac artery calcium, the guy who probably explained it the best is Douglas Mulhall, his book that he wrote with Katja Hansen, and here it is. It's called The Calcium Bomb. See? And of course, I provided, because my channel is basically a reference library for health, I've provided on my playlist called Cholesterol versus CAC, CAC meaning cardiac artery calcium. And I think I've explained a lot about that already on this video. And I'm proud, and so is my husband, proud to have a score of 0 on our cardiac artery calcium test. And just to remember, and I'm sure you've heard if you've been watching ketogenic videos and videos on the heart, especially Dr. Berg's video called Heart Nutrition, which I put on 2 heart-related playlists. If you don't have the vitamin K2, not K1 from vegetables, but K2 from animal foods and or certain fermented foods, like when it's taken as a supplement, K2 makes the vitamin D3 make the calcium go into all the right places and come out of the wrong places. So perhaps because we were some of the people who didn't know better for many years, took vitamin D without vitamin K2 except what would have been in our food, and we were potentially building up cardiac artery calcium. And I would say before we got tested, for about a year, we took vitamin K2 along with our vitamin D, because they work together to properly move that calcium from your intestines, not just to the bloodstream, but to the right places. Probably, well, at least could be why we have a cardiac artery calcium score at 60 years old of 0. Something that, since diabetes and a high insulin really damage your blood vessels, something that you guys should consider having done. It can be done. Most hospitals will do it without a doctor referral for about $100, and a lot of the imaging centers require a doctor's referral. So that's a high suggestion to do that. And before I sign off, I just want to remind you that half-ass keto is not keto, and if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. This is Kay signing off. I'm sorry the video was so long, but I had to put it all together because so much valuable information was accumulated over the last 2 years. Thank you for, if you did, for bearing with this video all the way to the end. And if you have any suggestions, questions, or topics you might like me to do a video on or find good information on and put it on my channel, even if it's not from me, you can email me at breakingthespells@gmail.com. Take care and put your health first. Then your looks second.